Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are beginning our third season as general manager slash coach of the Blackhawks. Took this on as a rebuilding assignment, which I think it still is. But very shockingly, the Blackhawks are also the defending Stanley Cup champions. We finished last season third in the Central Division, and we were a number 3 seed in the playoffs. We had the 7th most points in the Western Conference. But we were able to string 4 series victories together, and that meant that the Blackhawks were the Stanley Cup champions. So although on paper or on the computer screen, I don't know that our roster looks as high-powered as some in the game. So from that perspective, I'd say we're still in a rebuild. The fact that we did get our captain, Patrick Kane, his 4th Stanley Cup title last season, in a way means that we're already rebuilt, and we are certainly a team that thinks that we're going for it this year. Big news of our offseason was trading away longtime defenseman Seth Jones, who was a very good player, who was being paid as if he was an elite player, and also was about to turn 30 years old and signed for another 5 years when he's likely to be declining. So we traded him away to free up some salary cap space, and we used that money to most notably sign Gustav Forsling, a pretty versatile defenseman, as a free agent. We re-signed center Jason Dickinson for another 3 years. And then most notably, we signed the relatively young winger Luke Kunin. So hopefully Kunin can give us a little more strength on the wing. We felt last year with Kane and Arvidsson that our first 2 right wingers were obviously very solid. They both had some significant injuries late in the year and into the playoffs, and just feel that having another pretty strong option on the wing to go with our good situation at center and our less strong situation at left wing at least gives us a little more versatility, especially because Kunin can also play center. We are through the preseason where the Blackhawks were very good, put up a 6-1 record. The regular season does not start for about a week and a half for us at this point. So the main thing that we're going to be looking at right now is what's going on in waivers, and is there a player that we can potentially add to make our team better. We do have the youngster Colton Dock up with the big club, but could easily send him down to the AHL if we found a player that we preferred. We're also getting to the point where potentially moving on from Jake Evans is something to think about. Do like his defensive ability, is kind of a tougher forward for us, but I don't think he's in our long-term plans at this point. So he would be another player whose roster spot could be in jeopardy if we find someone interesting on the waiver wire, and we have the ability to fit them in under the salary cap, which is not nearly as good a situation as it looks, since the big contracts to Larkin and Kane are going to be coming back on the books very shortly when they're done with their international duties. And unfortunately for both Kane and Larkin, they did play in the World Cup, but lost 4-2 to Canada. So they are back with us now. Also have players in the farm system that need to clear waivers. Nothing too scary. Eric Kallgren is a backup goalie for us. We did sign him this past off season as organizational depth. He's an experienced goalie who is probably wants to be, and certainly you can tell by his unhappiness that he would like to be a backup at the NHL level, but to us, he's an insurance policy to Blackwood and Stolars, so hopefully we don't lose him. I can't imagine anyone's going to claim him, given that he was a free agent, and anyone who really wanted him could have had him through free agency before we picked him up, but who knows? There could be some injuries that happened during the preseason. Hopefully we won't lose him. And as we get ready for the season, going to change our budget. Definitely have higher expectations this year. Last year when we won it all, they just wanted us in the top 3/4 of the league. This year, coming off of a championship season, they want us to be in the top quarter of the league. So higher expectations, which do make some sense. We did, after our first season, increase the capacity at the United Center seated, and we added in this past year 1,177 standing room only tickets. We also raised our ticket prices coming off the championship. So we are actually going to pop up our game promotions a little bit. Would like to ensure that we keep selling out, particularly with the higher ticket price we're going to have this year. And going to bump up our scouting a little bit also now that the season is back underway. Continue to hopefully have decent player happiness. Want to try to save up as many points as possible for potential investments into the team over the long term when we do our annual budget. But by the same token, we are a win now team at this point, although I still have a little bit of a rebuilding mentality just because I felt like the Blackhawks were a team that was going to take several seasons to rebuild when I took them over, and things advanced a little bit with that surprising title last year. Advanced a little more quickly, or actually a lot more quickly than I would have expected. And as we were getting ready to look at the first round of players who are available for waivers, which is a pretty large list, did see that our former superstar Jonathan Taves is still a free agent. He ended up missing all of last year, and he's still looking for about $7.5 million a year, which is what he was looking for last season. So a little hit in my mind to the realism of the game that he's still looking for just as much money after spending a full season not playing, particularly at his age. You would think that demand would have come down for him. Certainly not somebody that we can afford. Taking a look at our roster, I guess Larkin and Kane aren't still back, but we are going to be right up against the cap. Doesn't mean that we can't get creative, though, if there's someone interesting on waivers. In terms of current ability, obviously going to spend a little more time digging into these players. No one really totally jumps off the page. In terms of potential, though, there are some interesting players. Could certainly think about Jacob Skarek from the Islanders organization is a backup goalie for us. Actually, the Islanders letting go of a lot of people. Simon Holmstrom also let go with some potential. And then Alex Bocage let go by the Avalanche. So we're going to spend a little time this, but Skarek to me is the most interesting simply because he's young, is in the final year of his contract, but is our backup right now. And if you looked closely, you would have seen earlier that Stolars did actually have a great preseason for us. But he's 30 years old right now. He's got 2 years left. He's our backup behind Blackwood. You can see McKenzie played 69 games for us last year. Stolars just 17 and was not nearly as good. Gonna at least compare Stolars to Mr. Skarek, because it would not be the worst thing to get a little younger there. Honestly, in terms of the mental ratings, Skarek kind of looks better right now. Goalie ratings, it's definitely more mixed. Better positioning from Skarek, but passing, poke check, favor, Stolarz. Skarek better with the blocker. Stolarz a little better with the glove and on rebounds, recovery, puck handling, low shots. Not as good a skater, but a little better with reflexes. So I think that Stolarz is certainly better right now, but he is 30 years old and he's also making more money. I don't think we'd get a ton for him if we shopped him. I'm guessing it would be a late round draft choice, if that, or a player that we probably don't care that much about. Yeah, 7th round pick from the Wild, or some olderish players. If we did trade him away, I think what I'm most interested in figuring out is, are there any red flags in Skarek's personality that would scare us off from him? Stays out of trouble, not that dirty, won't be well liked. So that's not optimal. I mean, our job security is really good at this point, even though we did trade away Jones and then raise ticket prices with the draft pick in the first round of VU, bringing Kunin on board, re-signing Radish, and then re-signing Kallgren, even though he ended up in the AHL. Fan happiness is about as good as it can be. Team harmony at this point is acceptable. Fermentin is the only disruptive player, but he's also a leader. And we do have a clique, but it's a smaller clique than it was before, and it includes our captain, our starting goalie, and an important winger. So kind of have to just make sure that we keep those guys happy and they don't bully too many players in the locker room. I think just because of the youth and the fact that if Blackwood stays healthy, our backup goalie is probably only going to be starting 15-ish games for us over the course of the year, unless we have a lot of back-to-backs in our schedule, which we didn't last season. I think I'm going to try to put in a claim on Skarek. It's very conceivable that, because presumably we have the lowest priority among anybody, that that claim is not going to go through. But he's an obvious one to think about. Also going to look at a few of the other more veteran goalies. If we could upgrade one of them compared to Stolarz, it might not be the worst move to make, although right now I am kind of thinking we just put in an offer on Skarek, and what we don't want to do is get on the hook for 2 goalies that we're going to likely have to keep on the NHL roster. So we may not do anything else, but I'm going to spend a little time digging in. Bocage right here, certainly the potential is intriguing. I guess the question with him would be, he is signed for a few more years, doesn't make long-term plans, disappears when the game on the line, similar to Ross Colton. I guess I do like that he is a younger player who's got some upside, according to our scouts. Pretty good physically, decent mentally, has some interesting offensive traits, does not bring a ton to the table defensively. And if I were to pick him up, I think it would most likely be to move on from Jake Evans. I don't think I would send Colton Dock down for him. And Evans is just such a different player with those strong defensive ratings, that given that we are trying to win right now, I think it probably makes sense to pass. And after that loss to Canada that I had spoken about, the U.S. bounced back. Neither Kane nor Larkin scored in the 7-6 victory, but the U.S. won the World Cup with a couple of our players on the team. And it looks like our claim of Skarek went through. So, yes, we have added some youth, and we're going to move on from Stolarz, even though he was one of the top goalies in hockey during the preseason. And you can see that with Skarek on the roster and the big boys, Kane and Larkin back, we're over the salary cap right now for when the season actually gets going. So we are going to trade away Mr. Stolarz. This may be a move that we regret, particularly over the near term. I think it's the right decision for the long term. Don't really want to bring on any of these defensemen that we've been offered. I'm guessing Savard is making decent money. Yeah, almost $3 million, and don't see where he really upgrades us anywhere. So I think that we are just going to Derek Grant, probably a similar situation. Actually, he's not making as much money, but I don't think he's a player who would be one of our top 7 defensemen. So we are just going to go ahead and take the 7th round pick from Minnesota in the upcoming NL entry draft next summer to get Stolarz and that money off of our books. I wonder what the fans will think of that. Doesn't seem to have had any impact. Skarek is unpopular as we feared, but he's also a leader, which is kind of an odd combination. But we've got a leader who's also disruptive in terms of Formenton, so not necessarily expecting everyone to exhibit the most consistent traits. And I guess if you're a outspoken leader who tells people things that they don't want to hear, maybe that makes you unpopular, but you would think that if it's done from a good place and helps people get better, that you actually wouldn't be unpopular. But still have acceptable team harmony at this point. And we've got a little more budget room now on the team. And as you can see, at least with Skarek, we feel like we've got a goalie who could be playing for us over the next few years with a little more potential. We'll have to look at his contract situation. We're going to auto-qualify him right now, whether or not we bring him back for $1.7 million at some point during this year or after the season is up for debate, but at least give ourselves the opportunity to hopefully match an offer sheet if he does get one from somebody else, and we've kind of forgotten about potentially extending him. And I think we do have another player that we're going to put in a waiver claim for. The Bruins just waived Dylan Holloway, who's only 23 years old. A reasonably versatile forward. He can also play any position on the front line with pretty good proficiency. And he's signed still for 3 years at a pretty reasonable contract. Given that, as I said, he's a little more well-balanced and can actually contribute a little bit on the defensive end, I don't know that we'll get him, but I think if it goes through, we will move on from Mr. Evans, as much as I like the potential defense that he's going to give us. I think he's likely to play fewer than the 51 games played that he played last year. And I just don't think he's in our long-term plans. So if we can potentially add Holloway and his versatility, I think that's the right move for us. So we're going to put in a claim on him also. I would be surprised if this one goes through. I think there's probably going to be a little more demand for a player like him than a backup goalie, as we saw with Skarek, but we'll see what happens. And a little surprised that our claim for Holloway went through. So I'm going to keep up Colton Dock. Want to see what he can do at the NHL level. Doesn't really have anything else to prove in the AHL. So that means we are going to shop Mr. Evans. Not sure what kind of demand there will be for him. I think there will be some. Probably a 6th or 7th round pick, I would guess, if there is teams willing to offer picks for him. Yep, a 6th. You can see there from the Rangers. 6th from the Blues. 6th from the Flames. Decent defenseman from the Coyotes, but I don't think he's good enough for us to chase after. Roland McCown, Florida Panthers. So we've got Panthers, Flames, Blues, and Rangers where we can get a 6th rounder for him. Have to figure out who we think is going to be the worst of those teams. And although I think the Blues had a pretty decent year last season, they are supposedly in a rebuild at this point, whereas all the other teams are allegedly competing. So not that the positioning on a 6th round draft pick is likely to matter all that much in terms of getting an impactful NHL player, but would prefer the pick to be as high as possible, and it sounds like the Blues may give us the best chance at that. So we're going to move on from Evans, add a little more youth to the Blackhawks roster as we try to rebuild on the fly while also winning. Again, and it also opened up a little more money for us if we do get to the point in the season where we've got a hole to fill and we need to take on some salary as we get closer to the trade deadline. Does give us a little more flexibility to have gotten off those 2 contracts recently and replaced them with younger players, and in the case of Holloway, someone who's signed for the medium term. And we are about to play our first game of the season. They don't even give us the respect of letting us start off the season and raise the banner at home in game 1 of the year. We are going to be at Columbus for the first game of the year, and we'll be at Montreal, and then at Florida, at Boston, at the Lightning, and at Pittsburgh. So starting with 6 consecutive road games before we will finally be home against Dallas in about little over 2 weeks, and the Blackhawks will be able to raise their 7th championship banner to the rafters of the newly expanded United Center. And we have an extremely strange situation developing. Vancouver has waived Quinn Hughes, a brilliant young defenseman who admittedly is making a ton of money. But I think if there's an opportunity to pick up a player like this for nothing, we have to do it. If it was just a pure glitch in the game, I wouldn't do it. But you can see that Vancouver is at $81 million in salary even after they take him off the team, between, Pettersson, Miller, and Ekman Larson. They've got 3 real big contracts on the team. So I'm guessing they have tried to trade him and there's just nobody who has cap space for him. But they should have figured that out before the season started. I would have to think, again, we're probably last in waiver priority. Now, there's not going to be a lot of teams that can fit him, and clearly we really can't either. But if we can bring a guy like him on board for nothing, that could just accelerate moving on from the veteran stay-at-home defenseman McCabe, and possibly also the veteran stay-at-home defenseman Murphy, both of whom are kind of not in our longish-term plans. So I'm definitely going to put in a claim on him. We won't be able to talk about rebuilding anymore if we bring him on board. And we probably shouldn't talk about it anyways, because we just won the title and we're 3-0 to start off the season. But bring on a player like that onto this team that is getting somewhat stacked. It would probably be annoying if I keep kind of claiming we're in a rebuild at that point. We're clearly going for it at this point. We're trying to defend our title. I think we've fixed some of the issues on this team in terms of making it better, making it more youthful, and getting rid of some not so great contracts. So we are in it to win it right now. And certainly a 25-year-old player who is a dynamic offensive defenseman like Quinn Hughes makes us more likely to win it now. If we can somehow bring him on board, we'll move heaven and earth to clear the cap space we need to fit him onto the roster. And although we lost our first game of the year at Boston last night, the claim for Hughes went through. So now we need to figure out how to actually make this work financially. And step one is going to be trading away McCabe, who's only got 1 year left. I think we're probably also going to have to try to get rid of Murphy. So it's going to take us from 7 defensemen that we really like down to 6, and we don't have a ton of depth in the minors. We're going to have to bring somebody up or pick somebody off of the waiver wire or free agency who's definitely going to be our 7th defenseman. I did kind of like that between Regula, Murphy, and McCabe, we didn't have to be playing any of those guys regularly. And clearly, if we move on from McCabe and Murphy, Regula's going to be in the lineup every day because we'll be down to 6 defensemen. And we'll definitely hurt our depth if we have to get rid of both of these veterans. But, I mean, granted, it's star ability. It's a very rough tool, but you can certainly make the argument that the only players better than Quinn Hughes on our team are Larkin and Kane, and Hughes would be the highest paid player on our team, which is kind of crazy. But if you think about it, we did get rid of an older defenseman, Seth Jones, who was making more money and not quite as good, and about 5 years older. So sometimes everything just comes up Millhouse for your team, and maybe that's what's happening with the Blackhawks right now. So we'll see, can we get anything for McCabe? And I like the stay-at-home defenseman that he is. But time to move on. Looks like we're only going to get a 7th rounder for him. Clearly we don't want a player back because although I guess if there was a cheap defenseman that we could get back, that would work, but doesn't seem like that's out there. It's a 7th round pick. I don't think where it comes from is going to matter, so let's trade him out of the conference. We will trade him to the Caps. Complete that trade. Dylan Holloway is outspoken, and we're losing some leaders with the moves that we're making, but we're bringing some talent onto the team, so I can't complain too much. But now we've still got to take out about another $1.5 million, and we've honestly got to take out more than that because whenever we get rid of whoever we get rid of, we're going to need to replace them with a body. We're not going to go with 22 people on the roster. So this will be a somewhat more difficult decision. But in retrospect, the fact that we saved money at goaltender by picking up Skarek, and we saved some money by bringing Holloway on board, makes this move, I don't want to say possible, but it gives us more options as to who we could possibly move on from to make it work. And I think there's kind of only two options for us. One of them is Kara, left winger, who's making about $2.5 million. The benefit from moving on from him is that we wouldn't have to find a new defenseman. We could just find another frontliner, but our defense is definitely stronger than our front line right now. And Kara is kind of one of the physically most intimidating players that we have, who really excels in that grinder role for us. And the other option is, I kind of alluded to, would be to move on from Connor Murphy. Probably not optimal to be moving on from one of your assistant captains just days into the season. Oh, he's just such a good player still. I love those defensive abilities for him. I love the versatility to play both right and left. And when I look at who we have signed to a contract right now, we've got lots of options. Well, not lots of options. We have a decent option with the young winger Gavin Hayes, who we're starting off in the ECHL, but looks like he could at least be competent at the NHL level. When I look at some of our younger defensemen, Kaiser and Korchinski, both have never played at a higher level than NCAA Division I hockey or the WHL, probably need a little seasoning. But, we've got not veterans, but experienced players who have played for us, or at least been on the roster. It looks like Louis Pin never actually played for us last year, but he was on the NHL roster at times. Reichel did play a few games for us last year. But I think Reichel's making a little too much money that we wouldn't be able to fit him in. We're going to have to find someone even cheaper than that. Hayes should be at the minimum. Yeah. So if we brought on Hayes, we would be going from $2.5 million, and let's make sure that that is actually what the cap hit for Kara is. Yeah, his cap hit's the same as his salary, so we'd be taking $1.75 million off the books if we make that move, and that would be just enough to get us under the cap. I don't love moving on from Kara because we don't have a lot of tough forwards like him. But our defense, if we can somehow keep Murphy on the team, which we can just barely do, when Murphy and Regula are our 6th and 7th defensemen, and we've just added a dynamic offensive defenseman like Quinn Hughes to the team. We may regret, particularly in the playoffs, moving on from a guy like Kara, but I think we've got to do it. And unfortunately, no draft pick offers for Kara, so we're going to have to pick up a player, which might make this not work. Because we can't afford to be, even if it's a minimum contract, as it would be with Hutton and Danny O'Regan. You know, they're both making close to the minimum, so but we're going to have to keep them on the team. Or no, we're not picking them up by waivers. No, we can send them down, so that could still work. If one of them was on a contract where they were making less in the minors. Yeah, we're going to go for O'Regan because his minor salary is less. All right, so we're going to trade Kara for Danny O'Regan. I thought I just made that trade. Did I click on refuse it or something and mess this up? Oh, no, I didn't. I moved away from it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. And then we are going to subsequently waive, if I can find him, Danny O'Regan, or not waive him, but send him down to Rockford. And then we are going to go, since we need another frontline player, I don't think we can fit Reichel on the team. I think it's going to have to be Luypin, who actually may be a little more ready anyways. And I want to make sure that Reichel's getting regular playing time. So if we put Luypin up onto the team, we just made it. All right, so that was unexpected. I've definitely weakened our front line, but the opportunity to bring on a guy like Quinn Hughes, I just couldn't let it go by. And with the fact that, you know, if Vancouver had like a $62 million salary, I wouldn't have done it because it would have been clearly just a bug in the game. But they are basically at the salary cap, so they must have had somebody coming off of the injured list, or they just didn't manage their team well during the off season and they had to offload some salary. And it worked out for us that at this point in the season, most teams are probably pretty close to the cap. And it wasn't painless for us because we did get rid of a good veteran defenseman and a good veteran winger, both of whom were really good defensive players. So we've definitely weakened our defense, but the opportunity to bring on someone who is just such a good offensive defenseman is an opportunity we couldn't let pass by. So we didn't. And the fans are happy that we brought Hughes on board. Team harmony-wise, added another unpopular player in Danny O'Regan, even though we have subsequently waived him. But, you know, hopefully if we're playing well on the ice, any of these potential looming issues that we may have caused by bringing on Skarek and Holloway and also bringing on O'Regan, even though he's hopefully going to be down in the AHL or picked up by somebody else, will be hopefully mitigated by some great performances on the ice. And after that 3-0 start to the season, we had lost that game to Boston, overtime loss at Tampa, and then a loss to Pittsburgh. So we are 3-2-1 with 7 points after that 6-game road trip to start the season. But we will be raising the Stanley Cup banner in the United Center tonight against Dallas. Hopefully we can also get a W as we begin our first long homestand of the new season. And unfortunately, we lost that first game of the year at home to fall to 3-3-1 on the season. Obviously, very early going, but if the season were to end today, we would be tied with 4 teams for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference. So, not where we want to be, but obviously a very small sample size, and we have played 6 of our first 7 games on the road at this point. And we've made it to the end of the first month of the season, 5-4-1 record, so playing a little better in those last few games at home, including a win against Winnipeg yesterday. Our popular jerseys, no surprise, Kane, Larkin, and Horvat, the new addition Quinn Hughes, and the goalie Mackenzie Blackwood. Take a look at the development report. Hopefully we are making some progress, particularly with some of the younger players on the big club. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it. A lot of players that we have rights to, and a lot of players in the minors. Was hoping we might see a little more development from the real young guys like Colton Dock at the NHL level, but doesn't look like that happened, at least for the month of October. Top selling jerseys for October, no surprise, coming off a title that top 2 in the league, 4 of the top 10 and 5 of the top 15 are Blackhawks. I'll check in very quickly just on attendance, see how we are doing with the newly expanded United Center. And our home average is 24,727, so 4 sellouts. So even with the addition of 1,100-ish standing room only tickets, and even with the increase in our ticket prices coming off that Stanley Cup championship, we are selling a lot of tickets, so that will be good for us financially. Given that, I'm going to try to save a little bit and invest a little bit less in game promotions. We'll see if we continue to sell out. Hopefully, if we're playing well, we will. Not going to bump up the scouting or the team morale quite yet. Things are going decently, although I guess we'll take a quick look at team harmony. It's acceptable. I'd like it to be better. So given that we do have the ability to invest a little more in morale, I think I'll go ahead and do that. Hopefully that'll help a little bit on the harmony side. Checking in on our last new message. I saw that Hughes won an award, and was going to really think that the acquisition of Quinn Hughes was working out well if he had won Player of the Month. He has been pretty dynamic with 4 goals and 7 assists for a blue liner, so he's scoring a point a game in +8 on the year between Chicago and Vancouver. But Jack Hughes, the center, who scored 11 points in 12 games for the Devils, is the Player of the Month. That +14 for the month certainly stands out for him. And Varlamov from the Islanders, off to a great start, 8-2 with a 191 goals against average. That's the type of month that will certainly get a goalie some recognition. So I thought that we may play more than just a month in this playthrough starting the season. But it ended up being so eventful with the waiver wire that I think I will call it an episode at this point. Right now, we're kind of right where we were a year ago, third in the Central Division, only a point away from being out of the playoffs. So it's been a respectable start for the Blackhawks, and have a feeling as this team gets more experience playing together, probably could help on the ice, because at this point, Skarek is a guy that we picked up through the waiver wire. Forsling, free agent signing. Quinn Hughes, waiver wire. Weepin, a youngster who we just brought up permanently. Doc, youngster making his debut. Holloway just picked up on the waiver wire. And Kunin is a guy who has only been with us for 10 games after we picked him up as a free agent last year. So we're kind of integrating a lot of new players onto our team. So the hope is that as that happens, we can start playing even better and better hockey than what we've started off the year with. But good start for the team. Love the fact that we've got a great young defenseman to build around, hopefully. Definitely limits what we're going to be able to do going forward. You can see at this point we have just 3 players who are in the final years of their contract. And they're also 3 of the lowest paid players on our team. So when we take a look at our salary obligations for next year, we are I'm more concerned about our cap obligations, but our cap obligations for next year, we're at $79.5 million. So only going to potentially have about $3 million to spend, and we've potentially got about $3 million in holes to fill. So doesn't mean that we can't make other moves when we get to later in this season or into next off season. But particularly with the addition of Hughes, this is kind of the roster that we're likely to have for the next couple of seasons. Not going to be a lot of changes to it unless we really make a dramatic change. So we have cast our die at this point, and we will see how this team plays over the next couple of months in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching. And if you're enjoying the series, would love it if you like these videos, subscribe, comment down below. Whatever you decide, hope you have a great day.